Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video, we are looking at IonQ. It is time for another update. And in the previous update, I have shared with you two paths that would take us to higher prices. One of them being within a very small time frame, where we have failed quite quickly to hold internal levels of support that would have allowed this structure to break out quite directly, to be honest. And then there was this blue scenario that would have allowed us to look for a large 1-2 setup. One of them has already failed. We had only managed to consolidate at these levels and then form a marginally higher high within this structure before starting this larger correction. But given the market situation we have at hand now, even though I do primarily expect higher prices across many different stocks, including this one, I believe we need to be prepared. I believe we need to lean more into the possibility of a significantly larger correction happening in the case of this chart. And even though we have been a bit avoidant of the idea of an impulse building in the case of the structure of this chart, we might actually need to look at this to be a realistic outcome. We might need to reconsider the structure that has formed within this movement to be instead a bigger wave 1 to the upside, and to look for the larger wave 2 correction. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It could actually end up being the opportunity we have never had in the case of this chart to enter within a wave 2 area of support. And the thing is, at this point it applies rather universally across many of the different stocks that it is not clear which path will be taken, because pretty much all of the stocks we have been tracking have internal levels of support that would allow direct extensions to higher prices. This blue interpretation in the case of IonQ being one such example, but all of them do have the possibility to start a larger correction. All of them do have the possibility to have complete counts within certain patterns, and nearly all of them have the possibility to extend directly to higher prices, but also to extend the corrections that we are currently within. So in the case of this chart, I am still tracking those levels of support, and we will even go into the smaller time frame. But I do want to highlight that given the current market conditions, even though I don't necessarily find this structure ideal for a potential impulse, I have to consider such a possibility. I do have to consider it possible for this to have been a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, where even within the internal wave 3, we would have an extended structure. This would have been a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, and again, the structure is not ideal. For example, this large degree wave 4 would have been shorter than this internal degree wave 4. It does happen. After all, it's within a quite small time frame, but it's not ideal. I have been reluctant to primarily follow this path, especially given the bullish market structure we have been within in the last couple of months. But this is changing, and as a result of this, we need to track two scenarios in the case of this chart. We need to be prepared for a deeper wave 2 correction, which I suppose we could track in white, and in reality, we might need to give a couple of attempts in the case of a trade setup for this chart, because I do see it entirely possible that we could bottom within this blue area of support, right, down to $50.4, form even a quite decent reversal. In fact, this would be probably my preferred interpretation for the next week. But then this could be just part of a larger ABC structure that would ultimately take us to the white area of support between $49.5 that extends down to $32.4. One more thing to mention, even though we aren't going to focus on other interpretations than this, there are a couple of additional scenarios that would allow, for example, one additional high before having a more substantial top within this white wave 1. Doesn't need to be a focus because the levels of support we would have for such an outcome would either be identical to the blue support zone or would be fully covered by the white and the blue support zone. So this is all we really need, and I understand this complicates the setup in the case of this chart. We actually have two setups here. but this is the situation. I see a very similar structure, maybe to a different extent on many different stocks, and we need to be prepared for all of these outcomes. So what can we really do practically? Firstly, within this blue interpretation, I would generally expect a smaller correction within this wave 2. It would already be a second degree 1-2 setup. I would primarily expect to have a smaller correction than I would have within this structure as a wave 2. And I would expect to primarily bottom once I have an A, B, C pattern complete within this movement down, potentially even a bit earlier, but that would be the primary expectation. In the case of the white structure, we would be looking to build a significantly larger correction, right? This could actually end up taking several months. Then if we actually push into those wide levels of support, even deeper into them, we would only have one scenario we would be tracking anyway. So in terms of action, we have a few options. I can be looking in the smaller time frame to form a more substantial bottom within this wave 2 in blue. I could be looking for a bounce. I want to maybe see the levels of resistance broken. I maybe want to see an initial 5V move to the upside, which would allow me to look for a trade setup. And regardless of the ultimate outcome, I would have another opportunity here where I know that if the setup fails, that if we cannot take off from these levels of support from this low, if I build something like an A, B, I wouldn't expect the wave C to bottom necessarily too soon, maybe just a slightly marginally lower low. It would be more likely than not that we would be heading into the white area of support. Possibly quite deep actually. So it might not be a bad idea to exit in the case of a failure to break out directly, right? Now, with that said, let's move into the actual structure because at this point, once again, we do not know how this will play out, but we can identify the levels we need to watch out for and the expectations in terms of a structure. So primarily within this movement down, I could be looking at this to build something like an A, B, C pattern, especially in the blue scenario. So in such an outcome, I would have a wave A down here, a wave B up, and within the wave C, I would expect to build a 5-wave pattern. At this point, I do not consider that we have 5 waves complete. In fact, even the third wave down internally might not be complete. So I would be watching out primarily for the levels of resistance for a potential wave 4. I would be watching out up to the 50% retracement for continuation to lower prices. And if we manage to get a sustained break above the 50% retracement at $61.8, I would start considering it more likely that a more substantial bottom would be in. If we even build an initial 5V move to the upside, all the better because I would have an internal 1-2 setup. Now, to be clear, this area of resistance, these exact levels, are valid as long as we have a bottom within the wave 3 itself. If the wave 3 extends even lower, the levels of resistance will need to be adjusted as well. But for now, this is the primary expectation, while in the white area of support, we expect this to potentially build only a wave A, to have then a larger wave B and a wave C. Within the blue interpretation, we actually expect this to be the bottom of the wave 2. And for now, one more thing I can highlight for you that I believe can be quite useful is that within the blue area of support, we do not actually have much structural support. All I really have is this bottom we have formed initially at these levels between $55 down to about $52. That can be more useful in providing the needed support to create the reversal. Unlike the white area of support, where I have plenty of structural support levels, plenty of levels that have historically attracted buyers. For example, here, this area around $46, here, this low around $40, and even significantly lower at around $36 we see significant support. Even this, below the 78.6% retracement, can actually be quite interesting around $31 down to $30, because a dip into those levels is actually a possibility without invalidating the white setup. And for now, we will actually stop here. You have all the relevant levels you need to watch out for. We understand that the context of the market is actually difficult at this point, and we have two main scenarios to watch out for. So these are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and if you enjoyed the content and want to support it directly, check out the channel membership, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.